Everybody. Let everybody get in here. My name is Dorothy Galloway. I am the moderator for this session. So welcome back. I'm a project coordinator in Dr. Kittle's laboratory at City of Hope. A reminder to just please use one admin questions to ask any questions throughout the session. Thank you, DJ Zeke and So Studios for bringing the fire during our last break. That was so live. I don't know if you guys were up dancing. My video wasn't on, but I was definitely moving. We're entering our final breakout session of the day, and I have the pleasure of introducing Shannon Lawrence of I Can Lead. Shannon Lawrence is very active in the community. For years, he's been an advocate for community organizations, police development, and implementation. His passion for change and finding solutions fostered his program, I Can Lead. The voices of the community need to be heard more so than ever with the current climate of America. And Shannon is here today to speak to us about the power of your vote. Shannon Lawrence, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Uh-oh, can everyone hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. So first, thank you for having me here. It's really an honor and a pleasure. Second of all, why would you have me come after the biggest party at 4 o'clock on an afternoon on a Friday? That's really not fair. But nonetheless, I'm happy to be here with all of you to talk about something that's really near and dear to me, really important, I think, and that is the power of our vote. If you have I think all of you may have the hand feature on your chat. Just if you've voted already, you plan to vote, just give me a quick wave or say me or something, a little bit of interaction. I see a thumbs up, I see 2 thumbs up, I see a hand clap. Cool, all right. So, and keep them coming, please, don't, I see you, Dee. So don't be shy. What I want to talk to you very briefly about, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to just kind of share some points with you, and then definitely want to be able to answer questions and have a bit of a dialogue around the political process. One of the things that I know is that politics and government can be intimidating for a lot of people. It can be scary. It really is not something that we do all the time. And so I think when it comes around, it can cause anxiety. I've seen in some cases, especially in this cycle, it can cause us to question some friendships that we may have with people. Even question family relationships, depending on their views on things. These are not things that we think about all the time. And yet, we have one shot every 2 to 4 years to really set the direction for our communities, policy-wise, that can have long-lasting and sometimes generational impacts. And so I'm gonna kind of put together a short little slideshow, share it, that will allow us to just kind of guide the conversation, and it should help us. Does everyone see the screen? It says power of your vote. Thumbs up, hand clap, something. All right, cool. So talk to you very briefly about the power of your vote. So the question is I figure out how to move this. What are we talking about? In the context of politics, power is the capacity of an individual to influence the actions, beliefs, or conduct of other people. So I want us to really think about what that means, when we talk about the power of your vote, right? And when you think about the ability to influence actions, beliefs, and the conduct of others, I think one of the things that we often think is that power is reserved for people who we perceive to be powerful, not really realizing that our individual presence is power in and of itself, especially at the ballot box, especially in the area of politics. And just to kind of give an example, some people, one of the things that we hear often from people is, my vote doesn't count, right? Because their vote, especially in an election season like this, their vote is one of tens or hundreds of millions that will be cast. And so it's real easy to think my vote doesn't count. However, think about it in the context of, if you go to a store and you want to buy something that costs $100 and you have $99 in your pocket, you are not walking out with that thing that you wanted. So that $1 is just as valuable and just as powerful and just as influential and just as impactful as the other 99 that you have in your pocket. And so that's essentially us. And I want us to always remember that our vote, our presence, our being is more valuable than $1. And so we should not take it that lightly, that just because we're one vote, that we don't make a difference. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that one makes a difference and what that one really means a little bit later on. But when we talk about power, what is the opposite of power? And quite simply, it's apathy. It's quite simply that attitude of, whatever happens, happens. You know, and when we vote, think about this, right? It's either yes, I want this, no, I don't want it. I don't know enough about it, or I just don't care. And the most dangerous person in that conversation is the one who doesn't care. Because with a little bit of effort, they could have swung an election one way or another, or at least made the decision to become educated enough to be able to make a decision. So we want to make sure that we are talking to people talking to people and them understanding the power of their apathy, because it's just as powerful as the vote. Plato once said, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And I think we all know and have seen examples where you're looking at someone who is serving in an elected position, and thinking to yourself, how did they get there? Or I can't believe, or they make such poor decisions personally that it almost becomes an embarrassment that they are even your representative. And that's not for all of them, but for some, right? And this is what happens when you refuse to participate. And so I thought it was actually a pretty funny quote too. But the most important thing is, when we talk about the power of vote, you know, what are we voting for? And there are two things that we vote for in particular. One of them is people, and you see a picture in front of you of the United States Congress, and we vote for propositions. When we think about the ballot, there are two things on the ballot: that's people and propositions. And this no matter where you are in the country. Talking about the propositions very, very quickly, because most of our decisions are made dealing with people. Propositions, very, very simply, they could be called referendums. They could be called a lot of different things in different states. But basically, it's when there is an idea for a law that goes straight to the people for the people to decide. Here in California, I live in California, and we call them propositions. And essentially, that becomes the law. And there are two main ways to get on the ballot, and that's with the petition of the people, or when the legislature decides that they either cannot or do not want to make the decision, they'll take it to the people to decide. A lot of times taxes end up as propositions or things that change tax code because they want to make sure that the people are making the decision. Now, as far as the people go, that's where it gets interesting, right? I think one of the beauties of our democracy is something that Tip O'Neill said. Tip O'Neill was he was a congressional member and Speaker of the House from 1977 to 1987. And he said, all politics is local. And so when we think about what that means, all politics is local, one of the things that I think is important for all of us to understand is that although a presidential election is the big election, that's the big thing. That's what everyone is focused on. The reality is that uh, the positions that have the most impact on us oftentimes are your county, your city council members, your county commissioners or supervisors or whatever they call them in your area, your state legislators. Here in California, we call them assemblymen. Some states call them representatives and senators. But those are the folks that basically are elected to represent a district in the district that you live in. And what's important about that, and I'll give you an example. I had the pleasure to serve as a planning commissioner in my city that I grew up in for about 10 years. And the Planning Commission is the commission, for those of you that don't know, is a commission that determines land use. So they also do the general plan for the city, but the most important thing is land use, meaning, are we going to build houses here, or are we going to build a grocery store here? Is there going to be a gas station here, or is there going to be a school here? They also look at the environmental impact of these things. As a commissioner, I was appointed by the council member who was elected by the people. Now, what made it very interesting was that in the city that I grew up in, it was a pretty racially diverse city: white, Black, Latino, Asian, really, really diverse. But up until about 20 years ago, there had never been an African-American or Latino, for that matter, on the city council. They've all been all white, all Asian, even though collectively they made up half the population of the city. It was not representation on the city council of two particular groups. So what that meant was, all while I was growing up in the community that I lived in, it lacked a lot of things that other communities had, like a decent grocery store, sit-down restaurants, places to shop, places to eat. One can even argue schools. Well, because there was finally an African-American and a Latino who was elected to the city council, they were able to appoint people to commissions that represented the interests of the voters. And they were able to represent their values, represent the culture, represent all of those things. And so what was once a diverse city on paper became a diverse city practically. It looked like it, it felt like it, it reflected it, because you finally had representation there. Now, although the local congressional member had always looked like the community, and even people in the state legislature, the reality is that it was the people at the local level that really have an influence on our local communities. When we think about the power of our vote, that's what we're really talking about. We're really talking about our quality of life. We're really talking about, what does that mean to live in a place that makes me feel comfortable, to live in a place where I can really uphold the values of what the Constitution says, and that's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When we think about 1965, the Voting Rights Act was signed by President Lyndon Johnson. And in front of you, you see John Lewis crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and at the bottom, the culmination of protests, marches, beat downs, dog bites, fire hoses, intimidation. The culmination of it was President Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act. What we also see is the reason why they had to sign the Voting Rights Act was because of voter suppression. And one of the things that we have to think about all the time is, why does voter suppression even exist? And the reason why is because there are people who understand the power of the vote and want to make sure that we are apathetic enough and don't care enough to exercise it, because they know that if we do exercise our right to vote, that it may infringe on other things that are important to them, that don't promote equity, that don't promote fairness, that don't promote justice, that don't promote equality. And just some ideas of voter suppression very, very quickly, because I do want to answer some questions. Voter ID laws, voter registration restrictions, voter purges, felon disenfranchisement, voter intimidation are just a few. Uh-oh. These are just a few, as well as gerrymandering. And I'm just going to talk real quick. Voter ID laws, very simple, are when you go to the polling place and they require you to have an ID to vote. That is actually a suppression tactic. In Lowndes County, in the state of Alabama, one of the things that they did was they mandated that everyone must have an ID, and then they closed the DMV office in the poorest communities in the state. That's a voter suppression tactic to make sure those folks don't vote. When you are in college and you go to college out of state, you have the right to vote in the state where you're in college, even if that's not your permanent residence. And so requiring a local ID is a voter suppression tactic, and not accepting a college ID is a voter suppression tactic. Voter registration restrictions, making sure you have to have an ID just to register is a suppression tactic. Telling people that you have to have a permanent address is a suppression tactic. Voter purges, we saw this happen in Georgia all the time, and that is where they go to clean off the rolls of people who've deceased and moved, but then they just wipe out an entire city or an entire zip code. And those folks don't even know that they've been purged until it's time to go vote and the voter registration deadline is passed. Mandating that you cannot be a felon is a voter disenfranchisement tactic. Standing out in front of a polling place with the shirt of a political candidate, that's a suppression tactic, as well as gerrymandering. So there are groups and people that are on the front lines trying to stop this. One of them is Fair Fight, which is an organization that Stacey Abrams founded some years ago, and they've been doing a lot of work in the state of Georgia. I think they've registered over 700,000 people in the state of Georgia through Fair Fight, people who've been purged or not registered at all. Another organization is the League of Women Voters, which is a national organization. It does great work all over the country, educating voters, doing voter guides, registrations, the whole nine. Common Cause is the same thing. And Black Voters Matter, their tagline is the blackest, coolest bus in America. And they literally have a couple of buses and they roll around to different cities and making sure that people are registered, that they're excited to vote, but also that watching out for voter suppression tactics. LaTosha Brown, full disclosure, the lady in the front of the picture, LaTosha Brown is one of my college mentors. And so they've been doing a lot of good work in the Deep South, making sure that folks have what they need in order to vote. So with that, what I want to leave us with is, your vote matters. We didn't have a lot of time to go through all of it, to go through every nuance of it, but I do want to answer questions. One of the things that I think is important for us to do, it's incredibly important that we do, is that we're not afraid to talk to our friends and family about the importance of voting, about the importance of issues, about the importance of using their voice, about the importance of registering. When our children turn 17, start that process of pre-registration. In some states, they let you pre-register when you get your driver's license. But the bottom line is, as we saw with John Lewis and even the accolades with him when he passed away earlier this year, there are people who literally put their lives on the line for us to be able to do one simple thing, and that's vote. In voting, it means so much more than just checking a box, but it really does have everything to do with determining how our future will be. So with that, I'd be happy to engage in some dialogue and answer some questions if anyone has one, or two, or three, or four.
Yeah, so it looks like we have a question from Lindsay Trevino, which is interesting. I had a similar question. So her question is, can you please comment on some of the instances of voter suppression we are hearing about on the news in the current election, like fake ballot boxes, limited access to ballot boxes, long lines, etc.? What can we do as citizens to make our voices heard?
So I think, so yeah, here, if I don't, I'm going to assume everyone is from California, but I'm not going to make that assumption. But so here in California, you know, it's definitely one of the more progressive states in the United States when it comes down to making sure that people have access to be able to exercise their right to vote. About a week or so ago, so one of the things that California did was when the pandemic hit, they wanted to make sure that everyone had access to the polls and would be able to vote. So maybe in the last election cycle, in the last major one, we began, instead of, they took away polling places. And if you remember, polling places used to be, you may end up in your neighbor's garage or local church or something like that. And they took all of that away. And they basically used public facilities to have these polling locations now. And in LA County in particular, you don't have to vote at the place closest to your house anymore, but you can go to any polling center in the county. So that was another way to get away from voter suppression. Because believe it or not, mandating that you vote at the polling place closest to your house actually suppressed the vote. Because for a lot of people, especially in LA, they may have had, especially a lot of poor people, you may have had two jobs and the jobs may not be in close proximity to your home. And so on election day, you may not be able to get to your polling place to vote. And so the rationale behind the polling place was, if we make it, if you can go anywhere in the county and it counts fairly, then you can go someplace that's close to your job, someplace that may be close to the school you go to, or someplace close to where your kids go to school, or wherever you are when it's time to vote. So with the ballot boxes, that's another thing that they did for this year in particular, which I think is going to stick around, to allow people to cast their ballot faster, easier, more convenient. In Baldwin Park, someone did set one on fire. They said some 200 ballots were in the box. They were able to salvage a good number of them, but they are going through the rolls to see who cast their ballot and try to contact those people so they can cast them again. I just saw, another suppression tactic that they use here is they do sometimes mandate that you have an ID. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to have an ID in the state of California. You just have to tell them your name. Oftentimes, they want the ID just to verify, because a poll worker doesn't, it just gets, especially if it's a long line, it's like, what's your name, what's your address, and all of that good stuff. So they just want to be able to read it. But for some people, it really is a suppression tactic. I saw another question. What do you do if you encounter?
Right, I was going to add, there's kind of a question that goes hand in hand with that.
Yeah.
Was kind of what was the advice that you would give to young voters and how to navigate like the distrust around this election with all the confusing, media and information online? And then if that is an issue and you do encounter an issue with voting, who do you contact and who do you talk to?
So let me answer the second part first. If you do encounter it, it's real simple. You can call, either go on lavote.net, or you can call the Secretary of State's office, or you can call the county registrar and recorder. You will have to make some effort in order to fix it, but no matter where you are, at the very least, and it really depends on what the issue is, right? If the issue is they're not allowing you to vote, then you have the right to cast the ballot, even if it's just a provisional ballot. So what I would always recommend is that if you feel like you have the right to vote and they're telling you you don't, one, actually, and this is the first time here in California, you can register same day. So even if you're not registered on election day, you can go in and fill out a voter registration card, cast your ballot, and it will be a provisional ballot. And it'll take a few days for them to verify it once you cast it, but it will be counted provided there's no other legal reason why you're not allowed to vote. But yeah, just ask for a provisional ballot. If it's an issue of voter intimidation, you do have the right to call even the local sheriffs, right? Or call the local registrar recorder. But in most cases, they know, in most cases, they know the precincts where it could be a hot spot for voter intimidation, because intimidators are not very stealth. I mean, they make it known where they want to suppress the vote. And oftentimes there are a lot of groups out there that are watching, because I've done that before, where I've been part of groups that go to hotspot polling places just to watch and make sure that nothing illegal is happening, especially in tight races. As far as the first part of the question, I wouldn't worry about that. I think one of the things, especially for young people, I think one of the things that I would tell you is, if it weren't important, no one would be trying to stop you. If it weren't important, no one would be trying to confuse you. And as you go through life, you're going to realize that the most important things in life will often come with some sort of conflict. It's just the way it is. So I would not let any of the mixed messaging be a deterrent. The reality is that you know that voting is important. You know that your vote is important. You know your voice needs to be heard, and you know you want it to be heard. Make it heard. There are, I don't know a magic word to tell you other than do it. Unless someone is physically stopping you from getting to the poll, it's important. Now, the challenges that do exist that are real is really determining, how do you want to vote on certain things? And that's where you just got to do the research, right? And the ballot propositions are confusing. That's intentional. There are groups out there and all they do is they research these things to try to make it plain and simple. But yeah, honestly, don't let any of that stuff intimidate you. I found out, my parents grew up in Alabama, and my grandmother actually was able to vote in the early 60s as a Black woman. And I asked my mom, I said, how did that happen? She said, oh, she passed the poll tax. And it tells me that no matter the barriers, when we're determined to do something, we're going to overcome it, and we're going to be successful, and we're going to be able to make our voice heard. And so I know for me personally, I always think about if my grandparents do it, then what's my excuse? And there really isn't one, because I don't have nearly the barriers that they had. I know we're almost out of time, so thank you so much for your questions, for your concerns, for paying attention. If there's anything else, I'll be happy to answer very, very quickly.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think everybody really appreciates this information. I think the last thing was there's just a little bit of uncertainty around provisional ballots not being counted. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
They will be counted. Provisional ballots are always counted. And remember something, in spite of what you see on TV, election results are not certified until like 14 to 21 days after election day, because they make sure to count the ballots, they count all the provisionals, if there's a challenge to it, all of that. And so I would not worry about that at all. And even if this election goes to the Supreme Court, that's only one race, and that would be the presidential, not the local races. So do not worry about your provisional ballot being counted. It will be counted.
Well, thank you so much for all of your information. I believe we'll be directed back to the main session in a couple seconds. But I want to thank you for your time. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to let us know.
Thank you, everyone.